A big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video.
Well, morning everybody, Happy New Year and fantastic to see you all again. I am in Lightroom today and I want to talk about masks. They are the most important part of Lightroom in my opinion, something I use on every single photo. And I want to show you the 5 things that I do the most really and how I do that. I want to give you some examples. But before I do that, I just want to talk about who you could probably say is the OG of landscape photographer, Ansel Adams. And this is his book, The Print. I read this book cover to cover many times when I used to do black and white printing when I first started photography. And it is an amazing book. There's so many things you can learn from it still now. But what I wanted to say is that he would have loved Lightroom. He massively liked the idea of the visualization of the image into a print and how he can do that through dodging and burning, which is one of the things you can do with masks. But you know, even to the point where he draws exactly what he's going to do, the bits he's going to make darker. And also, you know, he says the subject was predominantly grey, but the emotional impact was quite strong. My visualization was rather dramatic. And then he goes on to say what he did to create that visualization. I think that that's really important in landscape photography, visualization. So trying to get an idea of what you felt like when you were there, what the mood was like, and trying to create that in the image. And hopefully what I'll do today is show you exactly how to do that using masks. And we're going to get straight in with luminance masks. So luminance masks are something that Photoshop users have had for a long time. And Lightroom users we've had for a little bit less time, but it's getting more and more powerful the way you can do luminance masks. So the simplest way, a luminance mask basically allows you to go and mask out an area with a certain luminance value. So for instance, if I wanted to find all the dark areas in this image here, I could go and do that. But in this case, I'm going to find all the light areas. So I go over to the masking panel here on the right, click that button, and I'm going to go range, luminance range, and then I'm just going to select a light area here, and that will give me a starter luminance range. So you can see here, because what I want to do with these light areas is I want to warm them up a little bit. So you can see here then I've got 4 sliders really. This is where it starts and stops. So starts and stops here, the left and rightmost ones. And that can say, so in this case, I want to just make that a little bit more. And then this is the fade of it really, how gradually it transitions from that start to stop point. So that's like a harsh transition, which I never do. And that's a much softer transition. So I want it all the way to the whites and I want to transition it to the darks, you know, quite softly. So you can see there's a nice transition there. You can show that if you want like that. And once I've done that, I can do anything I want with that luminance value. So in this case, I'm just going to warm it up a little bit. Because I just want to just show a little bit warmer light. I remember that light being a little bit warmer. So you don't do much, but you can just warm that up. So that's a simple way of using it. Another way that I use it, and this is a snow scene. When I'm using snow scenes, by the way, I like to change the background to white when I'm doing a snow scene. So you can see the snow's looking a little bit dirty here. I don't want to increase the luminance, the white of the darker areas though. So a great way of doing this on a snow scene is you just again create a luminance mask. I'm going to just get the light tones here, so I'm just going to click here. Again, you can play about with this. I'm just going to do it really quite quickly, and we'll just have a bit of a transition here. And now what I want to do is I just want to increase the whites a little bit, and this is going to increase just the whites that I want. Now I can increase the exposure a little bit and reduce the highlights a little bit, so I can know that I'm just messing with those bright whites in the scene, so the tips of this, and that just is a better way I find of managing snow. And then if I wanted to, if I didn't want to affect the sky, I can then intersect that with another mask. So I can click on here and click intersect by clicking the option button on a Mac and click radial gradient, and then I can just there just intersect that luminance mask with this radial gradient here. You can see I'm hovering over the radial gradient. So wherever the two cross over, then it will only do it to that. So you can see now that if I just switch this on and off, it's just affecting the whites in the foreground here. Another great way of doing it is in the shadows. So this is a scene from Luskentire. that was almost a year ago now, which seems crazy, but yeah, this is a scene from Luskentire. So here what I might want to do is I just might want to select the luminance of these shadows here, and again I might just want to just get that to exactly how I want it. And then quite often in shadow areas, I quite like to warm or cool those down a little bit. So in this case, I think those rocks are a little bit cooler than that. So I can just go to the color temperature here and I can just cool them down. And you can see that's just changing it just a little bit. And I think that it's just a really great way of changing colour in a scene that impacts mood rather than just changing the whole thing. Because if I'd have changed the colour balance of everything, I think the sky and the sand and the water just wouldn't have looked quite as I wanted it. But this rock definitely was cooler. So, in fact, I think it was probably just a little bit more purple hue to it as well. And you can do whatever you want. You know, if I wanted to, I could darken just those tones down as well. So that's Luminance Masks. You can do the same thing if I wanted to just grab the dark areas of the sky and darken those down. That's a good way of changing contrast as well. So it's really easy to do things like that with the Luminance Mask. On to the next one, and that's the Radial Mask. And I'm going to put some links up here, so make sure you click there to other videos that I've done that concentrate on these masks in a little bit more detail. There's one here to the Radial Mask. So the Radial Mask I use pretty much all the time on the sun. If I just click here and then just click Radial Gradient and just put it over the sun, I find it's really useful for just softening the sun when you've got a sun like this. So you could just increase the exposure a little bit if you wanted to, or decrease the exposure. I mean, it's good to play around with this, but one thing I always tend to do is go down and just add a little bit of dehaze. But once I've done that, that reduces the saturation as well. So I quite often increase the saturation or increase the temperature as well. And then by playing around with this, you can get a very soft feel to the sun. Now, if I look at this, you can see it's affecting the ground around it as well. But I feel that little, just subtle, that little glow just makes a bit of a difference. So that's the simplest way of using a radial mask. But sometimes in an image like this, you know, you think, I don't want to create, there's no sun here. Well, there is a sun, but we can't see it. But I actually want to, there wasn't much definition in the sky here. And what I want to do is I want to brighten this area up, but I don't want to brighten this mountain up here. There's many ways I can do this. I could just select the sky, but I find this works better if you use a radial mask. So I'm just going to create a radial gradient here because I just want the brightness to affect that. If I just increase the exposure here, you can see that it doesn't really work that because it's increasing the exposure of the sky, the dark clouds in the sky and the mountain. But what I can do is I can intersect that with the luminance range that we just did and say I only want it to work on the brighter areas. And now I've got these two intersected together and I can change how that works. Now, we might just want to just make sure that that has a nice gradient to it. Now, that's been intersected with this radial gradient. So you can see here that on the mask, that it's just affecting this bit here. And now, when I'm increasing the brightness, it doesn't affect the mountain as much. Now, you can change the power of this, but this is a really good way. Again, just being subtle, it's a really, really good way, this, of just creating these really subtle effects that make such a big difference to the atmosphere, the mood of your image. Again, on this image, I would have done something similar because a radial mask here would work really well just for here because the sun was coming from this direction. So I might do quite a big radial mask. And on that, I might want to dehaze the image a little bit, but you can see I don't really want to dehaze this mountain here. So this is a good one that you might want to intersect with the sky. However, if you do that, you won't get any effect of this radial mask on this area here. So again, I think this is probably a better one to do with a luminance range. So again, I'm just going to just select the bright areas here. And obviously you would play around with this a lot more than I am doing to get it right, but you can see now that I'm just affecting the bright areas now. Now I might, on that particular one, want to go back to the luminance mask and just extend it out a little bit more. So just make the dark area just be affected just a little bit more. The next thing I want to talk about is linear gradient. A lot of people use linear gradients, especially on skies. So if I just go here and then just, you can see I've already got one, but I'll just put another one on. A linear gradient on the sky here. Then I might want to do one quite big like that, move it up a bit, and have a graduation, and I can then go and darken the sky, and that often looks really, really good. The problem is that it darkens this mountain as well. Now, I'm not saying we don't want that darkened maybe a little bit, but we don't want it darkened that much. But that gradient, that darkness at the top going down to lighter at the bottom works so, so well. It's something that we've used with graduation filters so many times in the past in front of our cameras. We now do it in Lightroom. But we can now just select the sky and darken the sky. So we don't need the linear gradient, you might think. So we could get rid of the linear gradient and just go mask, create new mask, select sky. The problem with that is that when you do that and you darken it down, I never think it looks good, because you have this really hard edge for one, and then the sky is darkened in a very uniform manner, and I don't think that ever looks good. I always think it should be lighter at the bottom than it should be at the top. It's always better for a darker top of an image than a very uniform sky here. So what we can do with this sky is we can now intersect it. So I can just go to this mask and click the option key, click intersect, and click linear gradient, and we can put on that linear gradient onto that, and we now know that we've got a nice graduated gradient behind that mountain because it's intersecting with the sky. And now when I darken that exposure, it's not going to darken that mountain, but it's got a nice softness to it. You know, it doesn't look too harsh or too unreal. That's what looks really fantastic. So the linear gradient is great for that, and exactly the same. You can do exactly the same thing with something like this. You can see I've done it on this mask here. So I've just done it by selecting the sky, and it does it in a really, really good way. So a top tip is, if you find when you've done your select sky that it's not perfect, sometimes, and this doesn't work all the time, but you can then intersect that select sky with another select sky. I do not know why this shouldn't change it, because it should be exactly the same selection, but it does. So if I intersect this with another select sky, can you see how it's not selected as much as that mountain there? And it's deselected a lot around those trees. Now in this case, it's probably done too much, but sometimes that works really well if you just haven't quite got the selection that you need, and you don't want to just go and do it with a brush. So try that. But then it's good to just be able to darken that down. Now, obviously in this particular case, I probably didn't need both skies, so I can get rid of one of them. But yeah, it's a really great tool, that, by intersecting the linear gradient. Now the linear gradient is useful for loads of other things. So I don't just use it for the sky, but I might also use it. So here I might just go, okay, I just want to darken down this bit of the foreground here, and I might just darken that down. Or I might just want to darken the left or the right hand side. Or I might want to intersect it with another mask to just create a funny shape. So the linear gradient is just so, so useful, and I use it all the time. On to the next thing, and that is color ranges. So color ranges, I'm going to go and talk about in a number of different ways. So the obvious one of using color ranges, this was shot in Greenland. I don't have a lot of color in a lot of my images, but this is a really good example. But the obvious one for color ranges is you go and you create a mask, you click color range, and I think, okay, I want to select this house here, and I can do that, and then I can refine it and just select that house. So if I wanted to, I could then intersect or brush on that, and I could then go and change the color of the blue here, obviously really easily, by just changing the color temperature of that selection, which has just selected the blue. So it's really, really, really useful for many, many things. So a good example is this. So if I wanted to go and select this wave, then I could go and again, I could go color range, click this wave, and if I wanted to here as well, I could intersect that just to make sure I don't get any of the sky at the top. I could intersect that with a radial gradient and just do that. So it's just selecting just the wave, and then again I could say, okay, I want to make that a bit greener or a bit of a different color. So that's really, really powerful by using color range in combination with like the radial gradient, the linear gradient, even luminosity masks as well I've used it with. It's really, really good to be able to do that. And I just use it all the time, color range. It's such a powerful tool. There are times though when that doesn't quite cut it. So for instance, here, if I selected a color range, and so say I wanted to go here and select the color range green, then you can see it selected some of the rainbow. So if I then go and change the green and I make it greener, then it's going to change the rainbow as well. Now, it's not that obvious in this particular case, but if you've got other colors that are green that you don't want to change, they might actually be difficult to mask out of your image. The other way of selecting color range and targeting colors in your image, and I'm just going to delete this mask for a second, is using the HSL slider. We've used this many times. It's a fantastic way of creating style. So this isn't in the mask panel. This isn't a mask at all, in fact. But you can go and you can target certain colors. So if I wanted to, I could go to hue, click this button here, click on the color I want to change, and I can move that up and down and I can change it. But again, you can see that's massively changing the rainbow as well. But I could then go and target just the yellow or green here, and I could go, okay, well, it's just the green I want to change. But this doesn't really give you a huge amount of control. One of them is quite good at picking a particular color, but it selects everything. And then the other one is very broad in the colors. It's like yellow, green, aqua, blue. In 13.1, we got point color, which is this here, which allows you to really accurately go and select a color. So if I want to go and select this color here, I can go and pick it, and then I can go and say, click this visualize range here. So I click the point color, click visualize range, and then I can go and either just change the range here to just be accurately selecting the greens that I want. I could change the hue range a little bit here, but you can see it's still selecting that rainbow. Obviously I've then got control over that. I can change the hue how I want to, but it's still selecting that rainbow. And the problem with these tools down here is that you can't mask them. Or can you? You can. So point color is now in the masking tools, which is so useful. So if I go into mask now, say I just want to create a linear gradient, I'm just going to add it here. So it's just at the bottom of the image. Now it's going to go over the rainbow. We're not going to worry too much about that. And then I can go down and there's point color in this tools here. So then I can add to that the color that I want, which is this color here. So this is much more powerful than the color range picker in the masking, because this allows you to really accurately control that hue and luminance range that I want to change. So in this particular case, I might want to just not get the oranges, but just get the greens. So I'm just going to move this a little bit to the right. I'm going to get a little bit less of the saturation of those greens, but I want a little bit more of the luminance of those greens. About there. So I don't want to change this bit here, but I want to change these trees. So I quite accurately selected those greens, but you can see that I'm still going to be getting a little bit of this rainbow in this section here, and I'm also still changing these greens here. But because I can now do any masks that I want, with this linear gradient, I can then intersect with a brush. And this is so powerful. So when I intersect with a brush now, anything where I start brushing, that's the only area that will get impacted by that point color change that we've made. And we haven't made any change yet, but we're going to make a change. So if I just brush over this, like this, now to just see what I'm doing, we're just going to have to do some change. So I'm going to just change the hue a little bit to, I want it a little bit greener. And I'm going to increase the saturation a little bit, reduce the saturation, increase the luminance. You can see that it's only happening where I'm brushing that on. So I don't have to change it here. I don't have to, it's not changing this tree because that's not in the color radiance. And then I'm not affecting this rainbow because I'm not brushing it on there. And that's allowed me just to change really precise color in a really precise way. And it's so powerful that. So I'm going to do a video just about this in a few weeks. I've got a few ideas of how to do that, but to be honest, I'm still learning on this because I've only been using it for a few months, and as I start to edit more and more photos, then more and more ideas come out in my head. But it's just so powerful. The final thing is the brush. We've just talked about the brush there, but the brush is just Ansel Adams used the brush all the time effectively because he created all these little masks. I had them as well where you just dodged and burned everything. The brush allows you to dodge and burn. So burn is darker, dodging is lighter. And, you know, on an image like this, I might just want to lighten maybe just this area here of the rock. So I can just go and create a brush and then maybe just increase the exposure. Afterwards, I can always dial these down a little bit. I always like to have a really low flow rate, so a flow rate of 16 around. And basically the flow rate is the more times you apply that brush, the more times it that effect gets applied up to 100%. So it's applying a 16%, then another 16%, and another 16%. So here, what I can do is I can just say, okay, I just want to increase the brightness and just try and model this rock a little bit around here. And then maybe I'm just going to reduce the size. And the square brackets increase and decrease the size of this. Good keyboard shortcut. Maybe I'm going to just brighten that up. I try to do quite a lot of these rather than just do everything in one go, because then I can control them quite a lot. And then if I want to, I can change the amount. So maybe I want to darken those down, increase the whites, but then I can change the amount of all that effect there, which is really, really useful. But I do that on everything. So this is a really good example where, again, you can see some masks that I've done already, but on this, I might just want to just brush on some brighter whites. Now you could intersect this with the luminance mask, so the brush only affects the light areas of the image. So for instance, on this brush, I'll just intersect that with a luminance range, and I only want to affect just the brighter areas of this image. So what that means when I go back to the brush is if I just increase the exposure, then whenever I brush, it's just going to take the brighter areas. So it means that I can go and just increase the brighter areas here where I want to, just to create a modeling effect again. And I know that I'm not getting the really dark shadows whenever I do this, so it's not too obvious. And if I just switch this on and off, you can see it's just bringing out a little bit of depth into this image. Okay, before I go, I want to just show you a few tips with the masks. You probably know these, but really useful things. So the first thing is, if you just want to know where the shortcut keys are for the masks, and there's a little question mark button here. If you click it, then you get all the shortcut keys. So really useful to be able to learn those so you can just do things a little bit quicker. I won't go through them all, they're all there. The other thing is, if you hover over the mask, then you can see which area it's affecting. So I got my mask highlighting in red for the bit it's affecting. Really useful just to be able to quickly see what's happening with the masks there. And then also there's these three dots here. If you click that, then you can actually change that overlay. So you can, at the moment it's just a color overlay, but you can have it like white on black, white on image, image on white. So image on white is quite a good one, because then you can see which bit of the image is affected by the mask, which is actually quite useful sometimes. So sometimes I change to that. And then finally, you can also go to the color overlay settings. So if I click color overlay, you can change these color overlay settings. So I can make the opacity greater of the overlay. And you can see now that that's then a darker color, which often is useful as well. Okay, just stick around for this bit. It is a sponsor segment, but I think it's really important, especially at this time of the year. If you're a photographer, you have a lot of photos. And even with a hobby, it's good to be able to sell those photos. People might like to buy those photos from the locations that you've been, and having a website to sell those photos is really, really important. Squarespace is something that I've used for years and years. You've heard me talk about it so many times before. At the moment, I'm going through and actually just updating the prints for 2024 that I'm going to sell. So I'm going to go back through my 2023 images and my 2022 images, because I've not updated my print store for a while, and I'm going to add them in. It is super easy to do with Squarespace. You can also set up things like sizes. You can set up edition numbers, so whether you're selling 5, 10 or 50 of a print. And it just makes it really, really easy to be able to build that website out without any technical skills. So go and have a look at squarespace.com. And if you're ready to set up your own website or you want to get a domain, then you can go to squarespace.com/Nigel for 10% off or use offer code Nigel. It's a great time to do it. The beginning of the year, New Year's resolution, go and set up your website. Thanks ever so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this. I love talking about Lightroom and especially masking. Until next Sunday, where I think I might be in the Lake District. Bye.